Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Rogue Wave podcast, the frequency for all things pop culture and the disruptors behind it. We talk comics, movies, TV, and pop culture every Wednesday night, 8 p.m. Eastern, right here on Facebook.com/Rogue Wave Podcast, Twitch.tv/Rogue Wave Podcast. And then immediately after this live stream, you can find our podcast on all major podcasting apps, including Apple, Google, Spreaker, Spotify, Stitcher, Anchor, you name it, we're out there. Tonight, Todd McFarlane's controversial plan to save comics, Bloodshot retro review, J.J. Abrams in the news again, Dune, first look, and more. As always, I'm your host, Michael Dolce, joined by my co-host extraordinaire, the Lord of the live stream himself, Mr. Hassan Godwin. How are you doing on day 578 of this lockdown, stay-at-home quarantine?
I don't even know what day it is. I didn't know it was Wednesday until my alarm went off that I was supposed to log on for our show.
Yeah, this is like essentially like Groundhog's Day meets Walking Dead kind of territory. Yeah. I feel like that's kind of what we're living in today. But you know, on the good news is that we got a glimmer of hope that the economy, they're moving at least in the New York area to maybe reopen us up, get us out of the house. That would be exciting. Probably won't happen for a while, but define a while, right? What does it even matter at this point?
my wonder is not really when they're going to open things up, but when the population is going to feel comfortable enough to congregate again.
Yeah.
You know? I don't think they're going to start, as soon as they open things up, people are going to start running to the movie theaters or
or to Comic-Cons or anything like that.
Or gatherings and stuff like that.
I know.
Because it's just the COVID is a very strange situation because it's a very benign tragedy, for the casual observer.
Yeah.
The people who are suffering from it are the frontline people who are the EMTs and the medical technicians and stuff. They know it's a war. They know how terrible it is. But the people who are isolated and maybe if they avoid the news or they avoid information on social media, you could be forgiven for not even having any clue how it's serious this situation is.
Look, we're following orders. We are staying home. We go out. I mean, honestly, we've been stocking up for like a week and a half worth, 2 weeks at a time. So maybe my wife goes out, very early in the morning, after the senior hour, things like that. So really on our block. And we think our neighbor had it. He's like, yeah, I lost my sense of taste for 7 days. That was 3 weeks ago. And we're like, you had it. like you had it. He's like, yeah, it was achy and fevery. And I'm like, yeah, you just listed all the symptoms. So you're good now. You're clean. That's great. We literally
we hope. We don't really
know. I know. We don't really know. But I'm just saying, it's funny. I mean, we're keeping our distance. We're having driveway happy hours, just so it's almost this like fantasy. The weather's been nice. So we're able to take the kids out. It's been this fantasy land. Almost
for
like
some
we're in
of
a
us.
bubble. Right. No, we're in a bubble. Like we're in this like bubble because we are socially
I would definitely describe it as a bubble.
We are socially distancing. We are in our our own little world. We're doing what we're supposed to do. So we're being responsible. But by doing so, we are closed off from all the stuff that's happening. Meanwhile, I mean, we have a good friend of ours, his wife is a nurse down in New York City. She's in the COVID unit. She's in the 50 and under unit. That doesn't necessarily get talked about a lot, but there's a lot of people who are in their 30s, 40s, 50s who are suffering from this in very, bad ways. So, again, we like to think that we are a distraction. We like to think that we are entertaining you during this lockdown. It's been a very challenging time for us in a way. It was fortunate enough that March Movie Madness, occupied us the last few weeks, which it would have done anyway. But with no new movies coming out, we're gonna really have to dig into a lot of the stuff that's already out there, TV streaming land. So strap in. We'll try to enforce the positivity as much as humanly possible, and we'll begin with our Rogue Rage, all the rage in the pop culture world. Behold, Dune, exclusive first look. Timothy Chalamet, Zendaya, Oscar Isaac. It was a Vanity Fair article that came out yesterday, I believe, and it shows the new film adaptation directed by Blade Runner 2049 filmmaker Denis Villeneuve. Feuding Royals, A Deadly Planet, before Star Wars or Game of Thrones, there was Frank Herbert's legendary sci-fi novel. Now, here's the funny thing about this from my perspective, and then I'm going to ask you a question, Hassan, because I literally have no idea. I've heard of Dune, so I know of Dune.
Okay. Yes.
This might be the only movie this year in the pop culture sphere to actually hit its release date.
Which would be a coup for it,
right?
And for, I never can pronounce the director's last name.
Villeneuve.
All right, I will do my best to remember that.
Donde está tu baño? Donde está tu biblioteca?
Stop it! Don't know where the bookstore is. He is absolutely one of my favorite directors. He makes stunningly visually amazing films.
Yeah. Blade Runner 2049 was just... and
it was a solid movie.
Beautifully shot. Just beautifully shot.
Sacrilege here. I actually like that movie better than the original Blade Runner. Now that's a sacrilege.
The original Blade Runner's tough, man. It's tough.
But I mean,
watched it after the fact, so yeah.
Yeah, me too. I called it late. I am not. My opinion is not to be canonized, but he kind of never gets a break because his movies are very cerebral. As cerebral as they are, visually wonderful, and it just doesn't capture the mainstream fervor that say an Endgame would, or what was the other one before that, Infinity War kind of situation. Also, the material that he is adapting is notoriously inaccessible. It's been referred to as notoriously inaccessible.
Yeah, well, that's the thing.
Unfilmable. They've called the book unfilmable.
I'm reading the history. Was it David Lynch brought Dune to the big screen in '84, but it was incomprehensible. Sci-Fi, did it as a miniseries, and it was a hit, but it's kind of very dimly remembered according to this article.
It was a very compromised. It was wonderful. I really do think the miniseries was wonderful, but it was very compromised budget-wise. It was on the cusp, but it was on the last legs of when that era where we were accepting compromised visual effects and stuff like that for television. Sure. After
it's a good segue into our second segment today.
After Battlestar Galactica and Game of Thrones, we stopped. Yeah. We were like, okay, we see you could do cinematic stuff, so we're not accepting your crap anymore.
Yeah.
So that's when Dune got relitigated. The miniseries got relitigated as kind of substandard because the special effects were, it was in the last legs of that era. But it really was wonderful. It was a better adaptation of the book than the the David Lynch version.
Yeah.
Though I like both versions. I like Dune. I'm a fan of Dune across the board. So I've liked every iteration of it, and with all the warts and all. And I've read all 6 of the original books. I'm not really that much of a fan of the continued books, but we're not talking about that. But so I mean, I enjoy all iterations. I assume I'm going to enjoy the Villeneuve version. And the images look fantastic. So
here's
one last thing. I apologize. One last thing.
Yeah.
Villeneuve,
you're allowed to do what you want.
Right. Villeneuve and Dune are a perfect match because they're both very unappreciated. They're both unappreciated entities, really. Yeah. They've both made strides to become mainstream, and they've both only accomplished cult status.
Yeah.
So I mean, even if this doesn't explode like modern movies do, it's still going to immediately achieve the cult status that the rest of Villeneuve's stuff
that's
has.
The funny part about this, right? And this is it's as if we talked before the show. Actually, we didn't talk about this before the show.
But it's almost as if.
one of the things I want to do with this segment is, and it's a little hard right now because I think everything's the rage right now because people are dying for something to do. If they're not, while they're quarantined, what kind of rage, do we feel? Is there rage behind this? And I don't mean rage in an angry sense. I mean
fervor, excitement.
Yeah, is there buzz or no buzz on this? Because
I have no idea.
Quite frankly, I feel as if this is going to be just like Blade Runner 2049. People are going to be like, this was really great. I'm not going to go watch it. This looks amazing. Didn't see it. I feel like it's one of those things where, and they're doing it as two movies. I would not agree to make this adaptation with one single movie. The world is too complex. It's a world that takes its power in details. I feel like in this age of peak television, where we do have Game of Thrones, we do have patience because of streaming services to let things percolate. I mean, my kid is going nuts over PJ Masks right now. I think, at least from what I can tell on Netflix, the last time a new episode came out was 5 years ago, and all his friends love this cartoon show. So things are allowed to percolate. Things are allowed to take time to build.
Especially now.
Right, that's what I'm saying now.
Yeah.
Why? I feel like this is a no rage. There's going to be no rage to this. I think it's going to come and go. The only thing it has going for it is it's going to hit its release date, and maybe people will be excited to go to theaters by then.
True, maybe. And it's a very big possibility, but it is coming out during Star Wars time, right? It is a tentpole. It is science fiction.
It does look cool. The shots, the shots.
It does look cool.
It looks cool.
It will be the first piece of It probably will be the first piece of brand new celluloid, cinematic content that we get this year.
I know.
So if it can't break the glass ceiling, for the material and for Villeneuve, nothing ever will.
Yeah.
It's the conditions are perfect for it to really get an opportunity to shine.
Studios would rather work with a dozen Michael Bays because his movies make bank than a guy who can make a beautiful movie.
His movies are very
that doesn't make any money.
Are not challenging. His movies are not challenging, and they're
no. I get it. I'm just saying, studios would rather work with a guy that can make you money versus a guy that's going to necessarily.
But I mean, you don't make no studio is putting real money behind Dune without understanding that they're probably not going to make back their investment. This is a passion project.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't hire Villeneuve if you really wanted to get an end game kind of situation.
I know.
So like I said, this is just this is just kind of a gift from the gods kind of situation. Yeah. Not the plague itself but the circumstances.
With thumbs down on the plague.
Yeah, the circumstances, the conditions that this movie may or may not come out in is kind of it's a love note to it, just to give it the opportunity that it deserves, And I mean, look, it's two movies for one book, right? Yeah, there are 6 books.
I know.
So God knows what they want to do with this, but I got hopes. I hope it comes out.
We shall see. All right, shifting to this, Pattinson's Batman will explore Dark Knight's origins without being an origin story. Director Matt Reeves says his approach to Warner Brothers, the Warner Brothers tentpole, is very psychological, very emotional. It will not be an origin story a la Christopher Nolan's Batman Begins. This is an article with Nerdist. The writer-director behind The Batman said his Caped Crusader adventure will eschew the traditional origin story while still telling a story about Batman's origins. The Batman will pick up with Bruce Wayne during the early period of his superhero days and center around an early dash with evil that shapes his psychology and heroism. Sounds cool. They did the costume unveiling last week as well too on YouTube. We didn't really. We could have discussed it last week. We just had too much going on with the movie madness. Again, is there rage? I mean, that's my question. Quite frankly, doesn't this kind of fall? Two things. Doesn't this fall into the category of Spider-Man, where we've seen this now enough times? I mean, Batman's been on screen. I was watching Lego Batman with my kid, and they even make a joke. He's like, I've been on screen 9 different movies, played by 3 different actors. And it's like, 4 if you count Will Arnett's voicing of Lego Batman, which, by the
Yeah.
way, they made a lousy direct-to-video Lego Batman sequel without Will Arnett, and it was terrible. Even my son was like, I didn't like that one. He's 4. He's 4. I didn't like that one. I like the other ones.
That's pretty condemning,
right? Like
That's
after
pretty-
I remember why he's like you have to watch it with me, and I watched like the last 30 minutes of it. I'm like, this is terrible. Look, at this point, I know there's controversy in terms of like, oh, Robert Pattinson being Batman, but like, do we even need another Batman movie? I know the question is loaded. We don't need anything, but take it in the context of what I'm asking. In terms of there's been so many Batmans before, and B, I mean, I hate to say this, I don't want to see Batman's suit. I want to see Ben Affleck in his Batman suit in this movie. That's what I want to see. I really feel like, I can't believe I'm even saying this. Ben Affleck is the pinnacle physical representation of the Batman character on screen.
Yeah, he was the Zero F's Batman, as I call him.
Mm-hmm.
He attacked that situation with kind of a reckless abandon. He was the closest, in my opinion, to the Frank Miller era Batman, or the Frank Miller rendition of Batman.
Yeah,
it's kind of sort of Elseworlds, Dark Knight Returns, and we will only reference the first Dark Knight Returns. We're not going to talk about Dark Knight 2 or 3. Look, It does not fall into the category of don't care for me. I will be interested. I will want to see it. I am very tired of producer talk for these things, of where a producer comes up and gives a laundry list of reasons why this iteration is more worthy, or is worthy of consideration.
Yeah,
because we're going to do this, and then they give you that cheeky, but not in the way you think. But not in, it's going to explore this, but not, I do not want to see Batman's parents get killed again. I am not interested in seeing that. I've seen it 4 different times if you count Joker.
What I'd love to see
if you count Joker, we've seen the Waynes get murdered.
I would love to see a montage of Bruce Wayne's parents getting killed, while Uncle Ben is also killed. Like, just somehow, if you could do a mashup, Uncle Ben versus Thomas Wayne. Right? Like, wouldn't that be great? Like,
yeah, geez. I mean, like, okay, I get it. Just give me Batman. Even though Batman versus Superman, even though it did the Waynes getting murdered yet again, it cut straight to him being disillusioned and kind of a twisted, semi-crippled Batman, in his middle age, kind of, on the wane. No pun intended. And he and he fights like he's a dirty fighter. He utilizes all that weaponry and stuff like that. It was wonderful. It was weird that Ben Affleck in Batman versus Superman, produced my favorite Batman.
I would even go a stretch further. The 10 minutes in Suicide Squad was Batman. Like, that was like the
he wasn't even. I mean, he wasn't even showcased.
No, it was absolutely perfect. Perfect.
Now, if you could get Affleck's Batman and Ledger's Joker,
oh my God,
in one movie, it would have broke the franchise. It would have been definitive.
Wow.
Definitive.
All right, I want a rogue call to arms here. I want some fan out there to make I'm sure there's enough footage, maybe, in Suicide Squad and Batman v Superman and The Dark Knight to make that movie. I feel like we could make that somehow.
Or we could do a short movie of it, or at least
it's probably
some kind of wonderful little trailer. I mean, look, you still could do Academy Award.
I also want a cut of the profits that you made from the YouTube ads for doing that.
You could Oscar bait your way through it because you can, because of Phoenix's Joker has a lot of gravitas, right? So you can still get some kind of super mashup version of Batman versus Uber Batman versus Uber Joker kind of depiction.
Yeah.
But since Affleck is
if you could somehow dovetail it with Adam West running down the dock with a bomb, holding a bomb over his head.
Oh man, now you're getting into circus territory.
Now we're talking.
That's a bridge too far for me, Mike.
All right, the Batman will be in theaters in June of 2021, as will every movie.
Like
movie.
Like there's ever going to be movies again.
Holy
Absolutely.
Cow. All right. Finally, in our Rogue Rage segment, J.J. Abrams' editor still feels very strongly about Last Jedi consciously undoing Star Wars. This is off of IndieWire. It was actually on a podcast, The Outrage Over Rian Johnson's Star Wars The Last Jedi Just Won't Go Away. A recent episode of Light the Fuse podcast featured Mary Jo Markey, a longtime editor with J.J. Abrams. She actually did the editing, I think, on Force Awakens. She said basically she defended Rise of Skywalker, but she basically said that, I couldn't agree more when the conversation turned to Johnson's Last Jedi script undoing Abrams' Force Awakens story. It's very strange to have a second film so consciously undo the storytelling of the first one. I'm sorry, that's what it felt like. I don't even feel that's true about the third film. It took where the second film ended and just tried to tell a story. I didn't feel like it was consciously trying to undo. It just didn't feel that way to me. She went on to add, it's a completely different take on the Star Wars saga, talking about Last Jedi. To Ryan's credit, he stuck to what he wanted to do. He wanted to deconstruct the saga and open it up to go a different direction. That's the film he made. I know it's controversial, but isn't that kind of good in a way? You bring in new elements. That's why I say I feel very much in hindsight that the trilogy, I feel very much in hindsight that the last part of the trilogy, was just really polarizing. It was hard, I think, for JJ and the co-writer to decide what to do with it after that. It's like if someone wrote the middle of your novel, how do you get to end the novel? I just like bringing this up because it's a great story because it's so obvious. It's one of those things where after a while, in political speak, you can say, well, that's not what happened. And you could give a million reasons. You can talk your way into a million reasons, and you can back it up. But the product on the screen or in your face that you're reading is so clearly what she's actually articulating. So I actually have to give her credit for just being like actually honest. Whereas J.J. Abrams, like, to his credit, that's why they pay him the big bucks. I mean, he's as diplomatic as it comes. It's clearly
he's professional. He's being professional about it.
But it's clearly like. Yeah, okay, wink, wink, nod, nod. Yeah, no, Rian Johnson did not undo what I did, and I did not try to undo what Rian Johnson did, wink, wink, nod, nod. This woman is just blatantly saying, yeah, basically he did.
Yeah. Wow. The Last Jedi. Wow. Wow. I don't even know. You really just want to not be a cliche whenever the subject comes up and just start roasting it, Mm-hmm. I dislike The Last Jedi, and I dislike both. I dislike both Rise of Skywalker and The Last Jedi.
Yeah.
For various reasons. I didn't really like The Force Awakens because of what it was. But of course, I know.
I enjoyed it.
I'm just yeah, okay. But I didn't really like it because, and it's really, The Last Jedi is really J.J. Abrams' fault because he just refused to lay any solid foundations in The Force Awakens, so that so that Rian Johnson just had no choice but to stay on course. He left it wide open for someone to come in and just decide. I don't know.
I actually disagree. I'm not saying that he elaborated on what he put in The Force Awakens. He didn't. He did his typical thing, which was, the trail of breadcrumbs. But he left obvious trails of breadcrumbs that Rian Johnson just stepped over.
But I mean, look. But here's the thing: if you're not going to commit to your choices, you can't expect the next guy to commit to your choices.
Understood, yes. And I think that's where the issue always lies with that. I mean, the funny part is a lot of people have
that's really all I'm talking about. It's like, look, if you're not gonna tell me this is how it's gonna be, then you can't dictate to me when I decide how it is. When I make up my mind of what I want to do, you can't come back and say, hey, that wasn't where I was aiming for. It's like, well, you weren't aiming for anything.
Yeah. And it's funny too because a lot of people have issues with the Luke Skywalker storyline in Last Jedi. I actually don't. I actually think that could have been one of the strongest storylines had there been more planning involved.
Had there been more planning, and had there been more, and dare I say it, had there been more explanation. All you have to do is elaborate on what the choices, what the reasons were. It's like, okay, it's like this. You don't want to, he was telling the story, but he didn't want to actually add to the mythology, right? So he took.
In fact, he wanted to destroy it.
Yeah, so he took the pre-existing mythology.
Deconstruct it.
He took the pre-existing mythology and decided to apply a psychological makeup on top of it of how this would, that everybody had TD about
PTSD.
Whatever.
Just saying. Go ahead.
Post-traumatic stress disorder.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so everyone had
I'll edit
PTSD.
that long pause out.
Everybody had PTSD. I am dyslexic, so F you. And
don't you mean UF?
Yes. Yeah, UF.
There? I did that.
That would have been great. That would have been a great joke.
What do you mean would have been? It was.
Huh?
That was a completely great.
No, you're killing it now.
I know.
No, you're murdering it now. Anyway, so everybody had PTSD.
I just got canceled on Twitter. Actually, sorry.
It's your fault. That's why I didn't come with you. Good thing I'm
gonna listen to Twitter.
So anyway,
everyone had PTSD.
I don't know if you're gonna let me finish. Are you gonna let me finish?
Keep saying funny things. I mean, I can't help it. It's here. Go ahead. Anyway, go ahead. Make your point, because we got to review Bloodshot next. It's gonna be fantastic.
And he did a bad job. I don't feel like I'm not going. I'm not sparring with you today. I'm not doing it.
When we come back, chime in on the Facebook feed if you're watching us live on the live stream, or if you are following up on the Rogue Wave podcast page. We will reply days after as well too. Coming up next, our Rogue review, Bloodshot. Was it anemic on its own, or did coronavirus tank it? When we come back. Welcome back to the Rogue Wave podcast, the frequency for all things pop culture and the disruptors behind it. We kind of alluded to it earlier in the first segment, though, just a difficult time for movies, things being canceled and rescheduled. One film that kind of suffered because it came out basically the week that everything kind of broke down in the U.S. Was the Valiant Comics adaptation, Bloodshot. It did end up going straight to video or to VOD early, and we were busy with our March Movie Madness, but we want to come back and do a little retro review on the Bloodshot movie. But one thing we noticed, like right out of the gates, just the critics' response to it was pretty terrible. It was pretty terrible. The action, save for some moderately cool slow motion shots, and protracted fight sequence that take place in a glassed-in elevator shaft, is for the most part murky, chaotic, and hard to follow. Bloodshot is a trash compactor of a comic book film. Bloodshot is anemic. There was a couple of good reviews, though, actually. Vin Diesel brings the right balance of contemplativeness and meatheadedness to this action film. That's from the New York Times. Owen Gleiberman.
Contemplativeness, I think. I think
what did I say? What did I say?
Contemplativeness. I don't know if the other is wrong. I don't know if that's necessarily.
It's probably wrong.
Incorrect.
But I prefer my version. I think mine speaks better.
I'm sure you do.
Owen Gleiberman of Variety said it's smart trash and action matrix that's fun to plug into. But most of the other ones is, I think there's one on Common Sense Media. A pretty good sci-fi plot idea is mostly ruined by mindless action sequences, vacant characters, and a need to completely wring the life out of whatever cleverness the movie once might have had.
Please, what are they watching?
There is a lot
what do they think they're watching?
There was a lot of hate for Bloodshot.
What a surprise.
I'll I'll start this. I'll start with this. Life, I think, is about timing, right? I think if you know,
that's very deep.
I know. Everything
wow.
in life is about timing.
Did you write that? Did you write that yourself?
I wrote it down. Yeah, I did. I wrote it
did?
down. I'm literally reading off my cue card right now.
Okay. All right.
Some things in life, if you came out during a specific year, your movie is groundbreaking and something extraordinary. If you come out a certain time after other things come out, you're a hack, you're a clone, you're a carbon copy. I think this case, regardless of the pandemic, right? Let's pretend the pandemic doesn't happen. I think it goes the wayside. I think there's poor marketing. Friend of the show, Darren Sanchez, said that they did do a lot of marketing on male-centric channels like ESPN, Fox Sports, so they were really trying to appeal to the male demographic here. But for some reason, when I barely even knew a trailer was coming out. I just knew the movie was coming out because we do this for, we do this for a living. We do the show. So if you can somehow come out at a certain time, Venom is a great example of this. Why did Venom do so well? Because it came out at a time where everything was skewing in one direction in terms of the Marvel movies. Even the DC films kind of flopped. That unholy mess that was Venom was actually kind of cool when all was said and done. This one, I feel, if this came out in the 2000s during the height of the first wave of superhero films, I think it gets a much better reception both from audience and critics. Now, the audience, again, on Rotten Tomatoes, 78% liked it. So obviously people did eventually catch it, liked it. But, I had people chiming in on my Facebook page kind of saying, wait, are you talking about the movie or the comic? What is this movie? What are you talking about? So it just kind of goes to show how little faith the studio itself probably had in this adaptation to begin with.
Well, you got to understand that if you brought it out earlier, though, it would not have those special effects. It wouldn't be the same movie. Right. So it would be the same compromised budget that in conjunction with the era that it was brought out in. So that elevator scene, which I thought was the highlight of the film, of course.
Yes.
It wouldn't have looked like that, in 2008, or 2005 or 1997. It wouldn't have looked like that. It wouldn't have come close to that. If you could do the movie that we just saw, but 10 years earlier, of course it would have dominated,
I think so. I feel like it's 2005. We are sitting there going, finally a grim and gritty, realistic, portrayal of a comic. Because genuinely, I think in the 2000s especially, we were very self-conscious about comic books and graphic novels. We were looking to like the Batman Begins to legitimize the genre itself, the actual art medium itself.
Right.
We're not trying to do that anymore. Pretty much
it's been vetted.
Yeah.
We have received. We do know the extent and the heights that the genre can achieve. So we're not at the pioneering stage anymore. Absolutely.
No. But look, there was some faults with it. I wasn't quite convinced as to why the super soldiers. Sorry, spoilers for anybody who hasn't seen it. It's been out for 8 years now. That's what it feels like because we're in quarantine. I wasn't quite convinced as to why they would follow orders. I guess they kind of owed Guy Pearce for augmenting them, or whatever the case is, or maybe Vin Diesel.
The biggest mistake that the film makes is as at the point where the credits roll at the end, you still really have no idea who Vin Diesel is. You know what he can do, you know what he's capable of, but you don't know who he is, so you can't root for him, really. You root for his circumstance, but you don't really root for him.
Yeah.
And that's really the only mistake that the film makes.
Right.
I did appreciate the narrative, the way they kind of unfolded the story.
I did too.
Because it started to take on...
Yeah, go ahead.
It started to take on like a lot of tropes of origin stories, and it started to it wanted it to look like it was going to be your average revenge, recall my memory and then get revenge kind of story.
and it moved off that track very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was very interesting. And so now you're like, okay, sky's the limits now, because since we're not in your standard cookie cutter format of storytelling,
Right.
anything can happen now. So now, like as the action goes on, everything was unfolding logically, which was cool. The thing I wanted was like, okay, so now tell me something about this guy, so that, but when we hit Act 3, I'm 100% with him. I want to see him succeed. And they, there was a lot going on though. It was Bloodshot is from my Valiant days, I know very specifically Bloodshot's a very complicated character.
Sure.
The character in himself is a very 90s testosterone, rip up the bad guys kind of character, but his backstory and the science behind it and the circumstances that led to him becoming Bloodshot in the first place, is very convoluted. So I think that they tried to adhere to getting that aspect of it correct, explaining the science correctly, explaining the circumstance, and then there just wasn't enough room for them to give Bloodshot himself any kind of three-dimensionality. The other thing is Vin Diesel is usually Vin Diesel, everything he does.
Yeah, I know.
So I didn't have a problem with Vin Diesel being Vin Diesel. I think that was the only way to go, because like if you're not going to adhere to standard fare, and you're not going to give him any characteristics that are any personality, then he might as well be Vin Diesel.
Look,
you might as well give him Vin Diesel.
When you need to get a film made, you need to attach a superstar. A superstar has to buy in. If Vin Diesel is going to kickstart your comic book universe for you, or you hope to, you have to kind of buy in, and you have to lean in on what makes Vin Diesel Vin Diesel. It's I think it sums it up when the very close, of the film, they're getting in the car and he's like, I don't even know, where should we, where do you want to go? I don't know. Perfect. He's like our generation's Arnold, right? Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yeah, he is. He's
like you don't quite know what he's saying, but he shoots a lot of people up and he looks pretty cool doing it. So you kind of forget.
But that's what I'm saying. So you had him, so you didn't really have to. It was like a Schwarzenegger movie. You didn't really have to. He didn't have to be Quaid. Doug Quaid didn't have to really be somebody because he was Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Right.
But it would have helped in this day and age.
Yeah.
To get to be very simple. I was with him a little bit when he actually, and I'm not going to elaborate on the scene, but when he actually went to find his wife.
Yeah.
I
thought that was a great twist. I thought it was a very cool twist because it really, but yeah, I agree with you.
Now you've just revealed there's a twist to it. But anyway,
you're allowed to.
I was very delicate with that.
You're allowed to say there's a twist.
I'm trying not to. I don't care what I'm allowed to. Who tells me I'm allowed to do anything? I'm
an
American. I can do whatever I want. I can
did.
do what I want. I do what I want.
There will be no mutiny on this podcast.
There's no mutiny because I can't get to you.
That's true, actually. Very true, actually.
All you have to do is turn the system off, and the mutiny's kind of put to death. Anyway, having all that been said, I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I really didn't have a problem with it. I thought the action sequence was pretty good. I thought that there had been a buildup of enough animosity between Vin Diesel and the two guys he was fighting at the end of the elevator sequence for there to be some kind of stakes and some kind of weight behind it.
Yeah.
Which they.
I thought Guy Pearce was fantastic in the film. I actually really like.
He's always good. That's another one. It's like, but he's Guy Pearce.
Yeah.
Of course he's good. Of course he's all right. So yeah, I mean, it could have easily been $1 billion movie.
Right.
I've seen worse $1 billion movies. So like in this day and age, there's really no rhyme or reason to what's going to capture the cliched comment coming. Here it goes, 5, 4, 3, 2. Well, what's going to capture the zeitgeist of public fervor, and get everybody into it. That's why there's no kind of template to doing these stories that make them bona fide hits. The only thing you could fall back on is just make it a decent story.
Mm-hmm.
And Bloodshot is almost that. It's almost that. The only problem with it is that they didn't three-dimensionalize the main character.
Yeah. No, I can't disagree with anything you're saying there.
They very cleverly and very clearly defined his circumstances. And as normal human beings, you and I were both like, well, I wouldn't want that to happen to me. You know,
exactly.
You know, so you know why he got out. He tried to change his circumstance, why he wanted to get out of there. But
even at the beginning of the film, when I thought they were going to go down a certain road with the villain, when he's in the meat packing area and he puts on the music, he starts dancing, and you're just sitting there going like, oh my god, they're trying to be Tarantino here. Like I got angry because up until that point I'm like, wow, this is much better than I anticipated, and I was like, and then it was only for a brief moment, but there was actually purpose behind that.
Of course. And then when when they reveal that, you're like,
oh.
All right, yeah, this is kind of cool.
Like there was some. So to me, again, the timing of this movie, both in the context of the modern superhero genre. Sorry, it sucks. You picked the wrong time to come out with this. This would have been amazing 10 years ago, maybe 15 years ago.
But you could, like I said, you couldn't have done it 10, 15 years ago.
Right.
Because some of the stuff I honestly think what made this movie amazing were the visuals, like the way they conceptualized the thing that made him a superhero, for lack of a better way of describing it.
I think they could have pulled it off. I think they could have pulled it off in some capacity. It wouldn't look the same, but I think we were
just talking about Dune, right? We were just talking about like that sweet spot of really bad special effects versus 100% believable special effects. So, I mean, it's a crapshoot.
I mean, don't forget. I mean, around 2004, and don't get me wrong. This isn't necessarily the template for really good special effects, but like you had the Matrix Revolutions, and now mind you, they had a much bigger budget, so that obviously probably helped. But CGI was look.
No, that fight with Neo and Agent Smith. Every time Neo was flying,
I know,
brother.
I know.
I mean, at least these guys were falling down an elevator shaft, and you're like.
But you even alluded
looks like they're falling down an elevator.
When you talked about Dune, though, I mean, back then it was forgivable CGI. I think it's
not
possible.
Cinematically. It was television had forgivable bad CGI.
I think it's possible. One thing I wanted to bring up before we go to break. The only question I not that I stayed to the end of the film because it was digital and I just fast forwarded, but no end credit sequence. Well, I actually found something on inverse.com. Bloodshot producer reveals the post-credit scene you'll never see. A post-credit scene in the new movie Bloodshot would have opened the doors to the Valiant cinematic universe. Yeah. And this is Dinesh Shamdasani, who I've actually met before. Is a really nice guy. I got to talk to him a bunch when he was first relaunching the Valiant
you couldn't
universe.
Get his name right. That's
Isn't that it? Shamdasani?
Well, I mean, you had to frenetically, limp your way through it.
Did I get it right?
Huh?
Did I get it right?
I said yes, but you had to frenetically limp your way through it.
Mm-hmm. Whatever. The point is,
I'm just saying, if you knew the guy, you probably would have been.
Well, we just know him as Dinesh. This is Dinesh. Oh, hi, Dinesh. Nice to meet you. We had a great post-credit sequence. He told Inverse. We were talking to Ken Watanabe coming on board to play Toyo Harada.
It's Watanabe.
Watanabe?
Mm-hmm.
Watanabe. Oh, geez, Louise. I think I got that right. I think I'm right. The entire episode.
It's Ken Watanabe.
Okay.
That much I know for sure. You got Villanueva, so take a win, right? Take a win and a loss.
You can.
Yes.
That was the one thing I didn't understand. Mind you, look, the Valiant universe. I think to me it's Exo Manowar and nothing else.
Hot take. Okay.
In terms of recognizable characters, I mean, you have Turok the dinosaur hunter, but he actually
he's a big deal though. He
came from a different universe. So did Magnus Robot Fighter. Both of them were like the signature Valiant creations, but they were purchased. They weren't original.
That's true.
That's
very true. But I mean, they do belong to Valiant, or
Rye and Bloodshot. Rye and Bloodshot were also great, but they kind of looked too similar. I know that they're cousins. We had.
Yeah, they had the blood of heroes.
Right. We had Lisa Hawkins come on and explain that to us when she was on, which was fantastic. But to me, if you're, this almost felt like The Punisher in the 80s, where it was an adaptation and had no desire. And I guess, they made a conscious decision not to do this. They didn't want to be like every other superhero film with a post-credit scene that opens things up. So in that regard, I'm kind of like, okay, that's kind of cool. But I think you could do it like Wonder Woman did it, where you had nods to the rest of the universe. And, by not doing anything that references the rest of the Valiant universe, I feel like it actually invites, I forget who did. Was it Sony or is it Universal? Who I forget who actually produced this film, to basically kind of say, all right, we wash our hands of it. It tanked. We're done.
Well, I mean, you could say both, right? Because you could also say that it's refreshing that they didn't try to get you on the hook for an entire series of other movies. So I mean, it's subjective how you whether or not you view that as a mistake or an affirmation of success, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, and I don't disagree with you. It would have been nice to see some of those things and to find out that they're here to stay and that they mean to try to throw their some weight in the ring,
Yeah.
But I don't know. I mean, you could also see it as an attempt to elevate the genre, right?
Yeah.
To not try to be a carbon copy of previous iterations of a cinematic universe.
Yeah.
It's up to you, really.
Well, chime in. Let us know what you think. You can definitely hit up the Facebook feed. You can definitely do all kinds of stuff. When we come back, Todd McFarlane's in the news again. Always been a disruptor in the scene. And he's got some ideas on what we can do to save the comic book industry when we return. Welcome back to the Rogue Wave podcast, the frequency for all things pop culture and the disruptors behind it. Just want to remind folks you can get us on all major podcasting apps. Go to roguewavepodcast.com. It'll take you right to our iTunes. Sorry, it's Apple Podcast now. No more iTunes. I love iTunes. But we're on Spotify. Go look up Rogue Wave Podcast, Google Podcast, Google Play, Anchor, SoundCloud. Check us out. Do us a favor. Hit the subscribe button. Really helps us out. All right, previous segment, we were talking about the comic book adaptation of Bloodshot, and this is the segment we like to give you the inside info on all the stuff that's happening in the comic book world that will eventually make its way to screen. We call this Spinning the Racks.
Spin the rack, spin that rack.
Todd McFarlane, legend in the field, has an urgent warning to the comic book industry. We can't just sit here and do nothing. This came from a Forbes interview that he did. He's actually promoting a Kickstarter that ended up making like gobs and gobs of money. But he started talking about the industry. The fact is we have to do something. Things have changed in our industry, obviously, both on the toy side and the comic side. No new comics are coming out. It's a really dangerous situation, not just for us, but for any consumer industry that relies on established customer habits. If you give a customer a chance to break their habit, they might not come back. He ended up suggesting that publishers, the industry needs a consistent message, he says. Whatever that message is, right or wrong, we need to be consistent. We really need to speak with one voice, not 4 or 5 different publishers. If they put me in charge and no one wants that, I understand. Here's what I do. I take Image, Dark Horse, Marvel, and DC, the top 90% of the market, make a message from the 4 as a unified front, one message. At the very least, I'd say, surely we can throw in 10 new comics for free as digital downloads, top titles, the ones people really want to read. We can afford it. Doesn't necessarily help the retailers, but we can't allow customers to lose the exercise of being geeks. What do you think about that? Do you think that your prediction, you get your Swami hat on and make a prediction that this is like a drug, and people need to go week in and week out to get this stuff. And if they don't, they're just gonna, are they gonna realize they don't need it anymore? I mean, that's his number one fear, is that it's not a question of whether the retailers are gonna live or die. It's a question of whether or not people are still gonna want comics or not.
I'd say there's logic to that. I'd say there's science to back that up.
Mm-hmm.
If you stop eating sugar for 2 weeks, you don't crave sugar anymore.
Right.
I mean, for anything. I also agree with him that how are you going to let an industry that's been around for over 50 years? How are you just going to let it die just because one outlet, one facet of it is no longer able to distribute? It is a wake-up call to the entire industry that they should have been looking for other solutions to the distribution problem, instead of all, bowing to the, to the majesty of Diamond. And I don't say that with any, I don't say that with any business malice, because if you were Diamond, you do want to establish a monopoly, it's not, but I mean, look, I remember when we were kids, or when we were very young, much younger, and we wanted to, like, maybe not you and me, but I'm sure we both had our own separate journeys to get to here, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
In the comic book industry. And one of the biggest obstacles to trying to be an independent comic book creator was Diamond. You couldn't distribute your work. You couldn't get, you had to, they just would decide, no matter how much you paid them, or they would decide they would give you an exorbitant amount of money that you'd owe them to be able to distribute your book. Mm-hmm. Or they would decide they were only going to do it once in a small print run, regardless of how much money you decided to pay them.
Yeah,
it was, the parameters were ridiculous trying to get in. It was literally a gatekeeper towards getting in.
Even more so now. Even more so now.
But there's so many more ways now of getting your work out there. There's so many more ways of doing things.
But not to getting into comic book stores, minus you doing the rogue thing and just doing the guerrilla marketing and going in and trust me, I know independent comic book companies who have done this, and they've done it successfully, and Diamond to them is a tertiary gain. It's a secondary income. It's another way to market your product. But number one, they're selling directly to retailers who are hyping their books up and selling directly to them. And God bless them.
It's in the retailer's best interest. I need to get more, I need to get more stuff to sell.
Yeah.
Because having one pipeline to this entire stuff, even though you've built an entire store off of this product, and you've only got one, look how one decision has devastated the entire retail industry of comic books, to put everybody in flight. So, look, I'm with him. Whatever he thinks that he should do, I do not want comic books to end. I don't think they will end. I think the format will live on in various different ways. I think there's going to be a tremendous drop in quality control, and I think there's going to be a lot of fluff that's going to flood the market, flood the vacuum, and that's just that's going to put us in up the donut. For maybe at least 5 to 6 years of trying to wade through all the mess. I'd rather get the status quo back, but with some stipulations that it gives the industry a lot more flexibility in being able to do what they have to do to stay alive, and not having to to kiss the ring.
Here's the funny thing too, and you're making all great points. He even says the same thing. We have one distributor for print comics. They decided for a safety reason to cease operations, but because we're all tied to one person, that one decision affects the whole industry. It was probably the right decision, but we should do a reassessment when we all come out on the other side and ask some hard questions about how to buffer ourselves from this happening again. This is
no doubt. It doesn't make any sense strategically. Strategically, you yourself.
They've tried other distribution. Haven was a distributor for indies, but the problem is the quality control, like you said, the gatekeeper status. Indie comics. Look, I love indie comics. I actually posted on Facebook recently that the number of books that I actually bought in 2018 and 2019, the majority of them were actually Kickstarter books versus big two books. Or what you would consider indie would be like an Image or a Dark Horse or something like that. I'm a fan. I'm a friend to indie comics, but I've seen some really terrible. I've backed some Kickstarters where I get the artwork back, and I'm like, well, this would never, I would never want to put my name to this because it's awful.
I said, the quality control is going to take
well, it always
dive.
does. Yeah, it always does. And look, we're in the day and age where you're not supposed to say anything mean to anybody, but that also means like you can't critique anybody's work either in an online
meaningful
sense.
way.
Yeah, because you don't want to dare hurt anybody's feelings. But there's some really unprofessional indies out there, and that's why those indie distribution models never pay off. Plus, you get a flood of indie titles that the retailer has no idea how to parse through and just determine what's good or what's not, based on it. At least Diamond did have the quality control settings in place. So you sit there and say, well, I know what I'm getting when I buy a Wonder Woman book. I know what I'm getting when I buy a Batman book. I know what I'm getting, so there was things like that. So this could enhance it. But all that being said, I feel like the comic book industry is like Major League Baseball. Major League Baseball, the median age of a fan is like 55. And they refuse because they're so steeped in They refuse to embrace social media. They refuse to embrace, and all their money is tied into these TV rights that they've sold, to where they're making billions. The owners are making billions of dollars. Meanwhile, ask any objective sports fan, what's your favorite sport? And they'll say football or basketball. They might even say soccer now. So 30 years ago, baseball was our national pastime. It's not anymore. It's not even close to our national pastime. The owners don't care though, because they're making money. That might be the only difference where my analogy doesn't work here. But they have a fan base.
That's a big factor. That's a big
right. They have a fan base. Comics has a fan base that is aging more. And I'm not saying that the new generation is not reading comics. I think they are. I think they're on Webtoons. I think they're on all these digital platforms already. What you're missing out on, though, by charging $4.99 for a digital copy of something that should not cost $4.99, because it does not. There is no cost for production. By not allowing this to be a 99-cent digital download or whatever the case is, you're missing out on grabbing those readers to where the actual industry creating new stories can succeed. And look, like I said, not only am I a big fan of indie comics, and not only am I a big fan of print comics, when I do these Kickstarters, I always buy the print version of the book. I like printed material much more than reading on my phone. I'm just talking about the next generation. I think the next generation is ingrained on their phone. They are hardwired into their phone. I think that's where comics is going, and unfortunately, that does leave the retailers behind. I'm a big fan of comic shops. I love I love my 2 local shops here. I just don't see how this movie ends well.
It might not. It very strongly might not. I don't think it's going to end well for the status quo. I don't think it's going to end well for the way we were doing things before. I think I definitely do believe that something is going to rise in its place, and it's going to become the new normal. And I think that no matter what anybody says, you, me, or anybody else, nobody knows what that's going to look like.
I know.
Nobody has any clue what that's going to look like. But it's not going to – the format of comic books is almost perfect. It's almost a perfect entertainment delivery system. It's smaller than a magazine. It's cheaper than a television show. Yet it's got almost boundless possibilities of imagination. Absolutely no budget other than – and especially
imagination.
The way it is now, everybody could do a comic book from their living room alone, and at industry quality, industry standards. So it's not going to go anywhere, but it's going to be like years ago. I watched the behind the scenes of AI. Remember AI from Steven Spielberg,
Haley Joel Osment.
Yeah, which is a Stanley Kubrick movie and they basically showed that there was a computer program in the camera that inlaid a fictitious city in your camera as you were filming the shots. That would, every time you move the camera, it would move the city, the interior of the city, in perspective with the shot at ground level. Yeah. So your actor would be going through a green screen, but the camera, the computer program would overlay the template for the special effect in the camera.
Yeah.
So all your special effects team had to do is come in and elaborate. I mean, it's still complicated crap, but
Sure.
all they had to do is come in and elaborate the setup, and they wouldn't have to guesstimate, depth, perception, and stuff like that. So I made this comment basically. I said, look, the tools are amazing now. Eventually, the only thing that's going to separate the creators is your imagination, is your ability to tell a story, right? It's going to become that way. The playing field is going to be tremendously leveled on comic books. And it's only going to, the people who are going to thrive the most are the people who are able to adapt to the new format and who are able to utilize a tremendous imagination to be able to tell. Because, I mean, there's stuff in there. Google has programs where Google does sketches for you.
Right.
Google will sketch backgrounds for you. Google will,
right.
I mean, look, computers are going to come in.
That's a little trick of the trade, actually, too. Yeah.
Yeah. Computers are going to come in and totally make the artist, to an extent. Artists are never going to be replaced, but they're going to make the need for an artist a little more irrelevant.
Yeah.
And then, of course, after there's going to be a period.
Well, that's where style comes in. That's where imagination
exactly.
comes in.
But there's going to be a period of saturation with all that stuff, and then eventually it's going to come out that, just like they're saying with CGI, where doing practical is better than CGI. After we had our dawn of CGI and everybody fell in love with it and said this is the greatest thing ever, and now people are, directors or whatever, are going back for practical shots or practical elements to enhance their CGI because there are certain things that a computer can't fake, like water and fire, and there's just things that just don't work. So it is not the answer for everything. Digital for comic books is not the answer to everything. You still have to have a flair. You still have to have an eye for it. You still have to be able to do it. But we have to prepare because the playing field is going to be leveled, and because the gatekeeper is gone, the market's going to get saturated in all kinds of varying qualities of work. So it's only the strong will survive, as usual. It's going to be Darwin all over again in the industry, and the status quo is going to be gone. But I do not think the format's going to disappear. Quite the contrary.
Change is the only constant in life. Super deep way to end the show today.
Not really.
I want to thank my cohort in crime, Mr. Hassan Godwin. Go check out Bloodshot. Let us know what you think. Go check out, Todd McFarlane's interview. It's up on the Facebook page as well, too. Download our podcast. Go to roguewavepodcast.com, and you can subscribe. If you can click subscribe, that'd be really awesome. We really appreciate it.
Do it.
That would be really, really great. Next week, our Rogue ranks. We are going to rank the best Netflix shows to watch during this quarantine, which will hopefully end soon and end safely. See you guys next week.